The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord had not seen such a gathering in 300 years. 12 species, each ruling vast empires across the stars, had sent their most powerful voices to speak beneath the crystal dome of the Sara. The light of 1,000 distant suns filtered through the ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates. Ambassador Velkith rose slowly from his seat. His gray scales caught the light as he moved, and his ancient eyes swept across the faces before him. The Sirixi Elder had lived for 400 years, and in all that time, he had never felt fear quite like this. "I must speak of something that many of you will call foolishness," he began, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hearts. "I must speak of the humans." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Counselor Ethrin of the Veth Collective leaned back in his floating chair, his pale face twisted into a smile of amusement. "The humans? Ambassador, have you grown so old that you now believe children's stories?" "These are not children's stories," Velkith replied. "They are warnings. My people have kept records that stretch back 6,000 years. Before your species had learned to leave your world, Counselor, the Sirixi walked among the stars. And we remember what others have chosen to forget." Scholar Pren, the Concord's most respected historian, raised one of his 4 hands. His insect-like eyes showed nothing but polite doubt. "Ambassador, I have studied every archive in Concord space. There is no species called humans. There is no world called Earth. These are myths, created to explain natural disasters and military defeats that our ancestors could not understand." Velkith shook his head slowly. "They are real. They were exiled from this region of space after a war that nearly destroyed everything we had built. Our ancestors erased them from the records because they were ashamed. Ashamed of what they had done to provoke such a response. Ashamed of how completely they had been defeated." "Defeated?" Ithran laughed again. "By what? Soft-skinned creatures from some forgotten rock? The Veth Collective alone commands 10,000 warships. What could these imaginary humans possibly do against such power?" Velkith looked at the counselor for a long moment. "Everything," he said quietly. "They could do everything." The chamber erupted into argument. Delegates shouted at one another. Some mocked the old Sirixi openly. Others whispered among themselves, uncertain. The crystal dome above them continued to glow with starlight, peaceful and unchanging dot far from the Sara, on the edge of Concord space. The frontier colony of Arkith Prime continued its quiet existence. The world was small and cold, home to miners and traders who preferred the simplicity of the outer regions to the politics of the core worlds. Ships came and went. Credits changed hands. Life moved forward as it always had. Kiravel sat alone in the communications center, watching her screens with tired eyes. She was young for a Sirixi, barely 60 years old, and she had taken this assignment hoping for adventure. Instead, she had found endless hours of monitoring empty space and logging routine transmissions. Tonight, however, something was different. A signal appeared on her screen, faint and strange. It was not like any transmission in the Concord's database. The pattern was wrong. The frequency was ancient, something that had not been used for thousands of years. And yet there it was, clear and strong. She adjusted her equipment and listened more closely. The signal contained sounds she did not recognize. Voices, perhaps, speaking words in a language that her translation systems could not process. Music, if that was what it could be called, built from instruments that seemed both primitive and beautiful. Kiravel recorded everything and hurried to find her superior. Commander Drath was a large Sirixi, his scales dark with age and experience. He had served on the frontier for most of his life, and he had little patience for mysteries. When Kiravel showed him the recording, he listened for only a few moments before waving his hand dismissively. "Stellar interference," he said. Perhaps a pulsar we haven't mapped yet, or debris from an old probe. There is nothing out here, officer. Nothing but rocks and ice and empty space. But Commander, the pattern suggests intelligent origin. The mathematical structure of the signal indicates. I said it is nothing. Drath's voice was firm. Return to your station. Continue your normal duties. And do not waste my time with ghost stories. Kiravel left his office with her head low, but she did not delete the recording. Something told her to keep it. Something deep in her instincts, passed down from ancestors who had learned to trust their fears. That night, she stood on the observation deck of the station, looking up at the stars. Arcat's prime sky was famous for its clarity. From here, one could see the dense band of the galactic arm, countless points of light stretching across the darkness like scattered jewels. She had looked at this sky 1,000 times. She knew every constellation, every bright star, every familiar pattern. But tonight, something was wrong. She watched as a star near the horizon flickered and went dark. Then another. Then another. A patch of blackness was spreading across the sky, swallowing the light wherever it touched. Kiravel's blood ran cold. She activated her communicator and called the watch officer. Something is happening, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The stars are disappearing. The watch officer laughed nervously. That is impossible. Stars do not simply vanish. Look outside, Kiravel replied. Look at the sky and tell me what you see. There was a long pause. Then, she heard the watch officer's breath catch in his throat. By the ancestors, he whispered. What is that? Across Arcath Prime, people were stepping out of their homes and looking upward. Workers in the mining facilities stopped their machines. Traders in the ports fell silent. Children pointed at the sky with wonder and fear. The darkness continued to spread. Stars vanished by the dozen, then by the hundred. It was as if something vast and impossible was moving between Arcath Prime and the rest of the galaxy, blocking out the light with its sheer size. Alarms began to sound. Defense systems activated. Commander Drath rushed to the command center, shouting orders that no one knew how to follow. His confidence had evaporated. His certainty had crumbled. Kiravel remained on the observation deck, watching the darkness consume the sky. She thought of Ambassador Velketh's words, spoken in a chamber far away. She thought of the stories her grandmother had told her as a child, stories about creatures from beyond the rim who had once made the galaxy tremble. The humans, her grandmother had whispered. They will return someday. And when they do, the stars themselves will hide from their shadow. Kiravel had always thought it was just a story. Now, as the last visible stars disappeared behind the advancing darkness, she understood that some stories were more than stories. Some legends were memories, waiting to wake. Above Arcath Prime, the shadow continued to grow. And somewhere within that darkness, something ancient and patient was watching. The humans had returned. The shadow that covered Arcath Prime was not a single object. As the colony's sensors struggled to make sense of what they were seeing, the truth slowly became clear. Thousands of shapes hung in orbit above the world, each one larger than anything the Concord had ever built. They drifted in perfect formation, blocking out the starlight with their massive hulls. Commander Drath stood in the command center, his scales pale with shock. Around him, officers ran from station to station, shouting reports that made no sense. The defense fleet had scrambled, but their weapons could not lock onto the shadow vessels. The targets were too big. The sensors could not process their size. What are they? Drath whispered to no one in particular. What in the name of our ancestors are they? Kiravel worked at her communication station, her fingers moving across the controls with desperate speed. Every frequency she tried was filled with silence. The Shadow Fleet was not responding to any hails. They simply hung there, waiting, watching. Then, without warning, every screen in the command center flickered. Every speaker crackled with static. And a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, the ancient form that had not been used for thousands of years. "This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the United Earth Navy. We have returned. Stand down your weapons, and no harm will come to you." The command center fell silent. Drath stared at the speakers as if they had spoken in the language of ghosts. Around him, officers exchanged looks of confusion and fear. "Humans," someone whispered. "The humans are real." Across Concord space, the message repeated on every frequency. Emergency sessions were called on 100 worlds. Fleets were mobilized. Politicians who had laughed at Ambassador Velkith now demanded answers that no one could provide. On the Sara, Councillor Ethrin paced before the assembled delegates, his pale face twisted with fury. "This is a trick," he insisted. "Some unknown species using old legends to frighten us. We must show strength. We must attack." "Attack?" Ambassador Velkith shook his head slowly. "You would attack a fleet that we cannot even measure? A fleet that appeared from nowhere and blocked out the stars themselves." "The Veth Collective does not hide from shadows," Ithran replied. "We will send a warship. We will test these so-called humans. And when they are exposed as frauds, the galaxy will see that there is nothing to fear." The vote was close, but Ithran won. A single Veth warship was dispatched to Archith Prime, commanded by Captain Sorath, a veteran of 100 battles. His ship, the Veth Conqueror, was the pride of the Collective's fleet, armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Captain Sorath arrived at Archith Prime 3 days later. He looked upon the Shadow Fleet with contempt and opened a channel to broadcast his challenge. "Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Concord space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." There was no response. Sora smiled coldly and gave the order to fire. The Veth Conqueror unleashed its main weapon, a beam of concentrated energy that could vaporize mountains. The beam struck the nearest shadow vessel and vanished into its hull without leaving a mark. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the shadow vessel responded. A pulse of light, soft and almost gentle, washed over the Veth Conqueror. Every system on the ship went dark. Engines died. Weapons powered down. Life support flickered, but remained active. The crew found themselves drifting in darkness. Alive but completely helpless. Captain Sorath stood on his dead bridge, surrounded by officers who could do nothing but stare at blank screens. His ship, the most powerful vessel in the Veth fleet, had been disabled in seconds, and the enemy had not even tried to kill them. Back on Archith Prime, Kiravel watched the confrontation with wide eyes. She had expected destruction, fire, death. Instead, she had witnessed something far more terrifying. The humans had shown that they could end any threat without effort. They had shown mercy, but it was the mercy of a predator that did not consider its prey worth killing. Hours later, a small shuttle descended from the Shadow Fleet. It landed in the main port of Archith Prime, its design sleek and unfamiliar. Commander Drath gathered a security team and went to meet it, his hands trembling despite his attempts to appear calm. The shuttle's door opened, and a figure stepped out into the pale light. Captain Laura Beckett was not what Drath had expected. She was smaller than most Concord species, with soft skin and hair the color of autumn leaves. She wore a simple uniform without decoration, and her eyes were a deep brown that seemed to hold both warmth and steel. She smiled as she approached the Sirixi commander. "Commander Drath." "I presume," she said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Captain Laura Beckett of the UEN Harbinger. I have been sent to establish diplomatic relations between the United Earth Navy and the Galactic Concord." Drath struggled to find words. You are human." I am, Lava replied. And I understand that must be strange for you. Your people has spent 6,000 years believing we were a myth. But as you can see, we are very real. Why have you come? Drath asked. After all this time, why now? Laura's smile faded slightly. Because something is coming, Commander. Something that threatens both our peoples. We did not return to conquer or to take revenge. We returned because we need to stand together. All of us. Drath did not know what to say. He had prepared himself for war, for demands, for threats. He had not prepared for this calm woman who spoke of cooperation and shared danger. Lavra looked past him and noticed Kiravel standing near the edge of the crowd. The young Sirixi was watching her with a mixture of fear and fascination. You, Lavra said, gesturing toward her. You were the one who detected our signals, weren't you? I could hear your transmissions trying to decode our broadcasts. Kiravel stepped forward nervously. Yes, I heard music. And voices. I did not understand them, but they were beautiful. Laura's smile returned, warmer this time. That was Beethoven, a composer from our world who died a very long time ago. His music has traveled with us across the stars for thousands of years. She paused. I would like you to be my liaison, Kiravel. I need someone who listens carefully. Someone who looks for meaning instead of threat. Will you help me? Kiravel looked at Commander Drath, who nodded slowly. Then she looked back at the human woman, this creature from legend, and felt something shift inside her chest. Yes, she said. I will help you. Above them, the Shadow Fleet continued to hold position, patient and silent. Within those massive ships, thousands of humans waited for news from the surface. They had traveled for generations to reach this moment. They had left their isolation to face an ancient enemy that was still approaching from the darkness between galaxies. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue dot of Arcith Prime below. He thought of Earth so far away now, and of the promise his ancestors had made long ago. We will return when we are needed, they had sworn. And we will stand with those who once stood against us. The time had come to honor that promise. The humans had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. The journey to the Sara took 7 days. Captain Lara Beckett traveled aboard a Concorde diplomatic vessel, accompanied by Kiravel and a small human escort. Admiral Morrison followed in his flagship, the UEN Valiant, keeping a respectful distance from the Concorde's core worlds. During the journey, Kiravel spent every available moment with Lara. She asked questions about Earth, about human history, about the thousands of years that humanity had spent in exile. Lara answered patiently, painting pictures with her words of a world covered in blue oceans and green forests, of cities that rose toward the sky and ships that carried millions across the void. Were you born in space? Kiravel asked one evening as they sat together in the ship's observation lounge. Lara nodded. My family has lived aboard ships for 12 generations. Earth is a memory for us, a story we tell our children, but we carry it with us wherever we go. It is in our music, our art, our dreams. Do you miss it? A world you have never seen? Laura was quiet for a moment. I miss the idea of it. The feeling of standing on solid ground beneath an open sky. But my home is the fleet now. My home is my crew, my ship, my people. She smiled gently. Home is not always a place, Kiravel. Sometimes it is the people who walk beside you. When they finally arrived at the Sara, Kiravel understood why it was called the Jewel of the Concorde. The planet glowed with soft golden light, its surface covered in sprawling cities and ancient monuments. The crystal dome of the high chamber rose above the capital, visible even from orbit. Admiral Morrison landed his shuttle in the main plaza, surrounded by thousands of curious onlookers. He stepped out into the golden light, tall and gray-haired, his face marked by years of responsibility. Beside him walked Captain Beckett and Commander Reinhold, a younger officer with sharp eyes and a soldier's bearing. The delegates of the Galactic Concord waited for them on the steps of the High Chamber. Ambassador Velkith stood at the front, his old eyes shining with emotion. Behind him, Counselor Ethron watched with barely hidden hostility. Morrison climbed the steps slowly, stopping before the assembled leaders. He looked at each of them in turn, his expression calm and unreadable. "Thank you for receiving us," he said. "I know this is not easy. Your people have feared this moment for 6,000 years. But I have not come to demand tribute or revenge. I have come to tell you the truth." The delegates led him into the High Chamber, where seats had been arranged in a great circle beneath the crystal dome. Morrison stood in the center, surrounded by the representatives of 12 species. Curavel sat beside Laura near the edge of the room. Watching with anxious attention, Morrison began to speak, and his words carried the weight of millennia. 6,000 years ago, your ancestors discovered a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They found it rich in resources and decided to take what they wanted. They did not consider the creatures living there to be worthy of respect. We were primitive, they thought. We were weak. He paused, letting the silence stretch. They were wrong. Morrison described the invasion in simple terms. The Concord's forces had expected easy conquest. Instead, they found a species that refused to surrender. Humans fought with everything they had, using weapons they built from desperation and creativity. Within 50 years, they had not only driven the invaders from Earth, but followed them into space. Your ancestors were terrified, Morrison continued. They had never faced anything like us. We did not fight the way they expected. We adapted. We learned. We turned our own technology against them. And when we had pushed deep into your territory, when your fleets were broken and your worlds were within our reach, we stopped. Counselor Dethron leaned forward. You stopped? Why would you stop when you were winning? Morrison looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because we did not want to be like you. We did not want to become conquerors and destroyers. We had proven that we could win. That was enough. He explained how human leaders had offered peace. They asked only to be left alone, to live on Earth and explore the stars in their own way. But the Concord refused. They could not accept that a primitive species had defeated them. They planned another attack, gathering every ship they had for one final assault. So we showed them what we could really do, Morrison said quietly. We disabled every military vessel in 3 star systems simultaneously. We shut down their weapons, their engines, their communications. We did it without killing a single person. And then we left. The chamber was completely silent. The delegates stared at the human admiral with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Your ancestors erased us from their records, Morrison continued. They were too ashamed to admit what had happened. Over time, history became legend. We became monsters in your stories, ghosts to frighten children. But we never forgot. We watched you from beyond the rim, waiting for the day when we would be needed again. Ambassador Velkith spoke, his voice trembling. Why now? Why have you returned after all this time? Morrison's expression darkened. He raised his hand, and the dome above them flickered. The starlight was replaced by a projection, showing the edge of known space. There, in the darkness between galaxies, something was moving. It was not a fleet or a phenomenon. It was a shadow that seemed to consume the light itself. We call them the Hollow, Morrison said. They exist between dimensions, feeding on energy and life. They have destroyed civilizations older than ours, older than yours. They move slowly, but they are coming. In 50 years, maybe less, they will reach Concord space. He lowered his hand, and the projection faded. We encountered them during our exile. We learned how to fight them, how to hurt them. But we cannot defeat them alone. No one can. He looked around the chamber, meeting every pair of eyes. We did not come back to conquer you. We came back to stand beside you. Because what is coming does not care about our history. It will devour us all equally. The delegates erupted into argument. Some demanded proof. Others accused Morrison of lying. Counselor Ethran called for the humans to be arrested, insisting that this was all an elaborate trick. But Caravel noticed something that others missed. She saw the fear in Admiral Morrison's eyes. Not fear of the Concord, not fear of rejection. Fear of what was coming. Fear of the darkness that waited at the edge of everything. She looked at Lavra, who sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the chaos with quiet patience. Is it true? Caravel whispered. The Hollow? Are they really coming? Lara nodded slowly. We have been fighting them for 300 years. We have lost worlds, fleets, millions of lives. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They only consume. Then why come here? Why help the people who tried to destroy you? Lavra turned to look at her, and in that moment, Caravel saw something ancient and unbreakable in the human's eyes. Because that is who we are, Lavra said simply. We do not abandon people to the darkness. Even people who once were our enemies. Even people who have forgotten we exist. She smiled sadly. Humanity remembers its promises. We made a vow long ago that if we were ever needed, we would return. And here we are. The argument in the chamber continued, but Caravel barely heard it. She was thinking about the stories her grandmother had told, about monsters and saviors and the return of something lost. The humans had come back. Not as conquerors. Not as avengers. They had come back as guardians, and the galaxy was going to need every one of them. The Galactic Concord was torn in two. Half the delegates believed Admiral Morrison and called for immediate alliance with the humans. The other half, led by Counselor Ithran, refused to accept that the ancient enemy had returned as a friend. They saw only a threat. A species that had humiliated their ancestors, and now claimed to offer protection. They are lying, Ithran declared in private meetings with his supporters. This so-called threat is a fiction designed to make us lower our guard. Once we trust them, once we welcome them into our space, they will strike. They will finish what they started 6,000 years ago. Ambassador Velkith argued against him. I have seen their eyes, Counselor. I have heard their words. They did not come to destroy us. They came because they are afraid, just as we should be afraid. The Hollow are real. I feel it in my heart. You are old and foolish, Ithran replied coldly. The Veth Collective will not be manipulated by fairy tales and ancient ghosts. I will expose these humans for what they truly are. While the Concord debated, Captain Laura Beckett continued her mission of building trust. She invited Caravel to visit the UEN Harbinger, giving the young Sirixi a chance to see human society from the inside. Caravel had expected a cold military vessel, filled with soldiers and weapons. What she found was something entirely different. The Harbinger was alive in a way that Concord ships were not. Children played in the corridors under the watchful eyes of their parents. Gardens grew in special compartments, filling the air with the scent of flowers and green things. Music drifted from common rooms where crew members gathered to eat and talk and laugh. Lavra walked beside her, pointing out different areas of the ship. We have lived in space for generations, she explained. Our ships are not just war machines. They are our cities, our homes, our entire civilization. Every person aboard has a role to play, from the admiral to the youngest child. They stopped at the engineering section, where Chief Engineer Scott Palmer was supervising repairs to a power conduit. He was a large man with grease-stained hands and a warm smile. When he saw Kiravel, he wiped his hands on his uniform and offered one in greeting. "You must be our Sirixi friend," he said cheerfully. "Lavra has told me about you. Welcome to the engine room. This is where we keep the heart of the old girl beating." Kiravel did not understand the gesture, but she reached out and touched his hand awkwardly. Palmer laughed and showed her around, explaining the ship's systems in simple terms. He treated her not as an alien curiosity, but as a guest, someone worthy of respect and kindness. Later, Lavra took her to the medical bay, where Dr. Beth Taylor was treating a young crew member who had injured his arm during training. Beth was a small woman with gentle hands and eyes that seemed to see everything. "The Sirixi have remarkable biology," Beth said as she worked. "I have been studying your medical records with great interest. Your ability to regenerate damaged tissue is fascinating. Perhaps we could exchange knowledge sometime." Kiravel nodded, overwhelmed by the warmth she felt from these strange creatures. They were so different from what the legends had described. They were not monsters or demons. They were people, complex and contradictory, capable of both terrible strength and surprising tenderness. Commander Ryan Holt found them in the corridor and invited Kiravel to the observation deck. He was quieter than the others, his face hard to read, but there was something trustworthy in his steady gaze. The observation deck was a large room with transparent walls that looked out into space. From here, Kiravel could see the distant stars and the darkness beyond them. Holt stood beside her in silence for a long moment. "There," he said finally, pointing toward the edge of the view. "Can you see it?" Kiravel looked where he indicated. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then, slowly, she noticed a patch of space where there were no stars. It was not empty blackness. It was something deeper, something that seemed to swallow the light around it. "The hollow," she whispered. Holt nodded. "They are still far away, but they are moving faster now. They have noticed us. They can feel the energy of our ships, the warmth of our lives. They are hungry, and they are coming." Kiravel felt a cold fear spreading through her body. Can they be stopped? We have hurt them before. We have driven them back. But stopping them completely? Holt shook his head slowly. "That will take everything we have. And everything you have. That is why we need to work together." Before Kiravel could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridor. Officers rushed to their stations. Lara appeared beside them, her face grim. "Counselor Euthrin has made his move. He has convinced the Veth Collective to attack our fleet while we are distracted with diplomacy. 30 warships are on approach." Kiravel felt her heart sink. "No, he cannot be so foolish." "Fear makes people do foolish things," Lava replied. "Come, we need to get to the bridge." The bridge of the Harbinger was a calm center in the midst of chaos. Admiral Morrison stood at the command station, watching the tactical display with steady eyes. 30 Veth warships were closing in from multiple directions, their weapons charging. "Admiral," Commander Holt reported, "the Veth fleet is within weapon range. They are targeting our smaller vessels." Morrison nodded slowly. "Signal all ships. Defensive formation. No lethal response." Kiravel looked at him with surprise. "You are not going to fight back?" "We will defend ourselves," Morrison replied. "But we will not kill them. They are acting from fear, not malice. If we destroy their ships, we will only prove that they were right to fear us." He turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to the Veth commander." The screen flickered, and the face of a Veth admiral appeared. His pale features were twisted with determination and barely hidden terror. "Human fleet, you are ordered to surrender or be destroyed." Morrison spoke calmly. "Admiral, I understand your concerns. But if you attack us, you will only weaken both our peoples. The real enemy is not here. The real enemy is approaching from the void, and it will consume us all if we do not stand together. Lies! The Veth Admiral shouted. Open fire! The Veth warships unleashed their weapons in a coordinated barrage. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the human fleet. The human ships responded with precision. Pulses of light washed over the attacking vessels, shutting down their systems one by one. Ships went dark and drifted helplessly, their crews unharmed but completely disabled. In minutes, the attack was over. 30 Veth warships floated in space, powerless. Not a single life had been lost on either side. But something else had happened during the battle. Kiravel noticed it first, a shift in the darkness at the edge of the sensors. The Hollow had noticed the energy discharge. The battle had drawn their attention. They were moving faster now. Much faster. Morrison stared at the tactical display, his face grave. Signal the Concorde. Tell them what has happened. Tell them the attack has accelerated the Hollow's approach. We have weeks now, not months. He turned to face the assembled officers, human and Sirixi alike. The time for debate is over. The time for fear and old hatreds is over. Either we unite now, or we die separately. In the darkness between galaxies, the Hollow continued their advance. They could feel the warmth of billions of lives ahead of them. They could taste the energy of countless stars. They were hungry, and they were coming. The failed attack changed everything. Counselor Ethran was removed from power after his plan had not only failed, but had made things worse. The images of Veth warships drifting helplessly, their crews unharmed but humiliated, spread across Concorde space. And with those images came a simple truth that no one could deny. The humans could have destroyed them all and had chosen not to. Ambassador Velkith addressed the Galactic Concorde one final time. For 6,000 years, we have lived in fear of a shadow from our past. Now that shadow has returned, and it has offered us its hand in friendship. The humans did not strike back when we attacked them. They showed us mercy that we did not deserve. I say we accept their offer. I say we stand with them against the darkness. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in history, the Galactic Concorde and the United Earth Navy formed an alliance. Ships that had been built to fight each other now prepared to fight together. Kiravel stood before Commander Holt on the bridge of the Harbinger. She had made her decision days ago, but speaking the words still felt strange. I wish to serve aboard this ship, she said. I wish to fight alongside you against the Hollow. Holt looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. You will serve in communications, he said. The same role you held on Arceth Prime. We need someone who can coordinate between human and Concorde forces. Someone who understands both sides. Kiravel felt a warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, Commander. Do not thank me yet, Holt replied. What is coming will test all of us. Are you prepared to face that? I do not know, Kiravel admitted. But I would rather face it with you than hide from it alone. The combined fleet gathered at the threshold, the point where Concorde space met the endless void between galaxies. 10,000 ships from 12 species formed a line of defense, with human vessels positioned at key points throughout the formation. Admiral Morrison commanded from the UEN Valiant, coordinating with Concorde admirals who had once been taught to hate his people. Captain Laura Beckett had been promoted and given command of her own vessel, the UEN Horizon. She spoke with Kiravel by communication link before the battle began. Whatever happens today, I want you to know something, Laura said. You represent the best of what this alliance can be. Human and Sirixi, working together, trusting each other. That is what we are fighting for. I am afraid, Kiravel admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But do not let it control you. Lavra smiled. I will see you on the other side. The hollow arrived without warning. One moment, the sensors showed empty space. The next, the darkness itself seemed to come alive. They were not ships or creatures in any normal sense. They were gaps in reality, places where light and energy simply ceased to exist. They moved like a swarm of shadows, countless and hungry. Admiral Morrison gave the order to engage. The Concorde ships opened fire first, unleashing weapons that had destroyed armies and shattered worlds. Energy beams vanished into the darkness without effect. Missiles exploded harmlessly against entities that did not truly exist in normal space. Then the human ships activated their resonance engines. Kiravel watched from her station as waves of sound and light swept across the battlefield. The technology was unlike anything in the Concorde's knowledge. It did not attack the hollow directly. Instead, it disrupted their connection to reality, forcing them to become solid, vulnerable dot where the resonance waves touched them. The hollow screamed. It was not a sound that traveled through space. It was a feeling that pierced the mind, a cry of rage and pain that made every living creature in the fleet shudder. The battle became a nightmare of light and shadow. Human ships darted through the chaos, coordinating their resonance engines to create overlapping fields of protection. Concorde vessels followed their lead, adding their firepower to the assault on weakened hollow entities. Ships were lost. Human and Concorde vessels alike were consumed by the darkness, their crews giving their lives to buy time for others. The UN Horizon took heavy damage protecting a Sirixi transport, and Lavra Beckett ordered her crew to abandon ship while she held the line alone. Kiravel heard Laura's final transmission through her station. Tell Morrison to fire the pulse. Tell him not to wait for me. The fleet matters more than one ship. Tears streamed down Kiravel's face as she relayed the message. Admiral Morrison received the words with a face of stone. Then he gave the order that he had hoped would not be necessary. All human vessels, synchronize resonance engines. Prepare for maximum output on my mark. Commander Holt looked at him sharply. Admiral, that level of power will drain our reserves completely. We will be defenseless afterward. I know, Morrison replied. But if we do not stop them now, there will be no afterward. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, brace for resonance pulse. This is our moment. This is what we came back for. Across the battlefield, human crews worked frantically to coordinate their systems. Engineers pushed engines beyond their limits. Officers made peace with their choices. On the Harbinger, Scott Palmer held the power conduits together with his bare hands while Beth Taylor tended to wounded crew members who refused to leave their stations. Kiravel closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother, of the stories told in darkness, of legends that had become real. Mark, Admiral Morrison said. Every human ship fired simultaneously. A wave of light erupted from the combined fleet, brighter than any star. It swept across the battlefield like a sunrise, touching everything in its path. Where it met the hollow, the darkness burned away like fog under a morning sun. The scream that followed was beyond anything Kiravel had ever experienced. It tore through her mind, through her soul, through the very fabric of reality. She felt as if the universe itself was crying out in agony. And then, silence. The hollow were gone. The darkness that had threatened to consume everything had been banished back to the void between galaxies. The stars shone clearly once more, but the cost had been terrible. Hundreds of ships drifted dead in space. Thousands of lives had been lost, human and Concorde alike. The UN Horizon was a shattered wreck, its captain presumed dead. Kiravel wept at her station, mourning for Lavra Beckett, for all the brave souls who had given everything. Around her, the bridge crew worked in exhausted silence, too tired for words. Then, a signal cut through the static. This is Captain Beckett of the UEN Horizon. I managed to reach an escape pod before the end. Requesting pickup. The bridge erupted in cheers. Kiravel laughed through her tears, relief washing over her like a warm wave. 1 year later, Kiravel stood in the Great Hall of the Sara, wearing a hybrid uniform that marked her as a liaison officer of the Stellar Compact. The new alliance had replaced the old Concord, bringing humans and Concord species together as equal partners. Admiral Morrison addressed the assembled delegates, his voice strong despite the gray in his hair and the weight of the past year in his eyes. "We came back because we were needed," he said. "We stayed because we discovered something unexpected. We discovered that the people we had once fled from were capable of change, capable of growth, capable of standing beside us in the darkness and fighting for a future that belongs to all of us." He paused, looking out across the faces of a dozen species. The Hollow may return someday. Other threats will certainly come. But as long as we stand together, as long as we remember what we learned here, we will be ready. After the ceremony, Kiravel walked to the observation deck of the new Stellar Compact headquarters. Captain Lara Beckett joined her there, moving a bit stiffly from injuries that were still healing. "What are you thinking about?" Lara asked. Kiravel looked up at the stars, bright and clear and beautiful. "I am thinking about the stories my grandmother told me when I was young. Stories about the humans, about the monsters from beyond the rim." She smiled. "The stories were wrong, you know? You were never the monsters. You were something else entirely. What were we?" Kiravel turned to face her friend, this strange and wonderful creature from legend. "You were the ones who came back," she said simply. "When you could have stayed hidden, when you could have let us face the darkness alone, you came back. You kept your promise." Lara looked at the stars, and in her eyes, Kiravel saw the reflection of 1,000 generations of hope. "That is what humans do," Lara said quietly. "We keep our promises. We remember. And we never, ever give up." Above them, the stars continued to shine. The darkness had been pushed back. The galaxy was at peace, and humanity had finally come home.